Today, we're going to talk about a pivotal moment in the fight against apartheid. This is the story of the 1952 Defiance campaign, a moment that really changed the game for the resistance in South Africa.
Now, just listen to that slogan. Open the jail doors, we want to enter. It sounds completely backwards, right? But believe it or not, this was the heart of an incredibly radical new strategy. It was a plan to use nonviolence to totally overwhelm the system, to turn the state's biggest weapon, the threat of prison, against itself.
So the big question is, what could possibly push thousands of ordinary people to literally demand to be arrested? Well, to get that, you have to understand the brutal reality of the political situation that made this kind of desperate protest feel like the only option left.
It all kicked off in 1948. The National Party won the election, and they didn't just bring a change in government. They brought a massive, systematic program of racial segregation. Their whole platform was built on one single chilling promise: apartheid. And they got to work on it right away. And look at how fast this happened. It was staggering. In just a few years, they built this entire legal framework that controlled every single part of your life: who you could marry, where you could live, if you could even vote. This wasn't just segregation. This was the government trying to re-engineer society from the ground up.
For decades, the African National Congress, the ANC, had tried the polite route. Petitions, respectful requests for change. But faced with this, well, they knew that approach was a dead end. Pushed by their fiery youth league and new leaders like Walter Sisulu, the ANC made a critical shift. The time for asking was over. It was time for mass action. And this change in thinking set the stage for something South Africa had never seen before. The movement started gearing up for a huge act of nonviolent resistance, and it took a ton of careful planning and organization.
The symbolism here is just incredible. The campaign chose April 6th to make its first big move. Now, this was the exact day that white South Africa was celebrating 300 years since their arrival. So while they celebrated, the ANC and its allies organized a counter-event, a national day of pledge and prayer. Mass rallies, boycotts, it sent a powerful message: we're not celebrating our own oppression.
And this quote from Professor Z.K. Matthews really captures the mood. Only the African people themselves will ever rid themselves of political subjugation. What he's saying is, nobody's coming to save us. It was this powerful realization that freedom wasn't going to be handed to them. It had to be taken.
Now, this wasn't some chaotic, spontaneous thing. It was incredibly disciplined. On what they called the Day of the Volunteers, thousands of people signed this pledge. It was a serious vow, a promise to be nonviolent, to follow orders, and to be completely dedicated to the cause.
Okay, so the volunteers were ready, the people were mobilized, and the stage was set. On June 26, 1952, the campaign officially began, and that defiant cry, "Open the jail doors," started to echo across the country. And this was a truly historic moment, because for the first time, you had people from all racial groups, Africans, Indians, even a few white and colored activists, all united under one leadership. It was mainly the ANC and the South African Indian Congress, the SAIC, and together they formed this powerful new front against apartheid.
So how'd they do it? What did defiance actually look like? Well, it was through these simple, very public, and totally deliberate acts of civil disobedience. They'd walk into places they weren't allowed, use whites-only facilities, sit on segregated benches, break curfews, all of it done peacefully with the clear goal of getting arrested. And this whole thing was led from the very front. A young lawyer named Nelson Mandela was chosen as the volunteer-in-chief, and he was working right alongside these seasoned leaders from both the ANC, like Walter Sisulu, and the SAIC, like Yusuf Dadoo. This joint leadership was absolutely crucial to the campaign's success. The response from the people was just incredible. The campaign's momentum just exploded. Look at these numbers. It starts with about 150 arrests in June, but by August, you're talking thousands. It shows you just how fast this idea caught on and spread like wildfire.
Of course, a movement this powerful, this popular, it wasn't going to be ignored. The government, which at first kind of dismissed it, started to get seriously worried, and they decided it was time to strike back hard.
And the contrast between the two sides could not be more stark. On one side, you've got disciplined, nonviolent protest, and on the other, the state responds with more and more brutality. Mass arrests, raiding homes, caning young protesters, banning meetings, and eventually using lethal force. And then, what the leaders had feared most started to happen.
Heavy-handed police actions, like firing into crowds, ended up sparking riots in a few cities. The government jumped on this chaos, blamed the violence on the campaign, and used it as an excuse to pass these awful new laws, like the Public Safety Act, which basically let them declare a state of emergency whenever they wanted. With things getting so dangerous, the campaign leaders had to make a tough call and suspend the acts of defiance.
So the laws didn't get repealed and the active campaign was called off. Now, you might hear that and think, well, it sounds like a failure. But actually, the true impact of the Defiance campaign is all in its long-term legacy.
If you want to see the campaign's real success, just look at this. The ANC's membership absolutely skyrocketed, from around 7,000 members before the campaign to over 100,000 after. This right here might be its single greatest achievement. It turned the ANC from a fairly small group into a true mass movement of the people.
And the impact didn't stop there. The campaign forced the world to pay attention. Apartheid became a major issue at the United Nations. That multiracial cooperation, it grew into something called the Congress Alliance. And most importantly, it proved that disciplined mass action could work, and it permanently shifted the ANC from a path of moderation to one of direct confrontation with the state.
So that brings us back to the big question. If you just look at whether the laws were repealed, then no, it didn't succeed. But it awakened a nation. It built a massive movement. It united people across racial lines in a common struggle. And it really drew the battle lines for the decades of resistance that would follow. So was it a failure? Or was it the spark, the transformative moment that laid the foundation for the ultimate victory? That's a question worth thinking about.